Hey, discerning listeners, 90-Day Fiancé. Let's watch.
So during the photo shoot, how are you doing after that? You guys okay?
I feel like he doesn't want to see me grow or succeed. So I want him to realize, I feel like I'm the one person so far that's kind of been in his life that's never needed anything from him.
Maybe that's why you guys fight. Do you think?
So she said something interesting. She said, he doesn't want me to grow or succeed. Something, let's rewind that. What'd she say?
I feel like he doesn't want to see me grow or succeed.
He doesn't want to see me grow or succeed. So at the very least, that's a contemptuous judgment of Ed. It could be true, I suppose. I don't think it is. I mean, it's possible, but if it were true of it, that'd be truly awful. I mean, just imagine having a partner that doesn't want you to grow or succeed, doesn't want you to enjoy your life or something. It's pretty awful. And certainly there can be elements of that, right? Like some people will be jealous. I think, and men have a history of wanting their, heterosexual men have a history of wanting their wives or partners to not outshine them because men have been indoctrinated into a model of self-worth that involves always being better than women, right? So if you make this amount of money, you got to make sure your wife makes this much because that means you're not a real man. I mean, men have these ridiculous notions, not because they're born with them, of course, they're told them or modeled them. Anyway, so she is saying that he doesn't want her to grow. And one of the things to watch out for are these statements that we have about our partners. Again, if it's true, it's true. But it usually reflects a declining love and an increase in conflict or a lack of resolution to conflict. That for her, she's tried to resolve things with him, and it doesn't get resolved effectively. And so she walks away thinking, well, it must be that he doesn't want me to succeed. He actually wants to keep me dependent on him or something, which could be true, honestly. I mean, given what I believe to be Ed's issues, I think there are a lot of manifestations of his insecurity and desperation, and I think that could be one of them, right? It's another reason why he might date younger people, right? So there's that, but also it's a barometer at the very least for yourself. John Gottman and colleagues found this to be true, that when you develop a contemptuous narrative of your partner, it's a pretty good indication that the relationship is going to end soon unless you turn that around.
So I want him to realize, I feel like I'm the one person so far that's kind of been in his life that's never needed anything from him.
Maybe that's why you guys fight. Do you think he wants you to need him more?
Interesting. Another perspective that I don't think I knew, at least from Liz's perspective, that everyone in Ed's life needed something from him. So I guess that would be his daughter, maybe even his mom, and Rose, and maybe his first wife, I don't know, or maybe Ed. I don't know. I'd be curious. I'd want more information on that, because we almost never get any kind of elaboration on these individuals' lives in there, because you have to understand, these individuals have full lives, right? I mean, just think about yourself, all the people you're connected to, all the family members and coworkers and friends and all this stuff. And the way that the show edits things, it looks like these individuals have this very small circle of relationships, which of course isn't likely. So I wonder if that's some comment on Ed's typical relationship. And if that's true, then maybe that's something about him, the way he was raised. His father was abusive, right? So maybe he always felt like he had to take care of his mom, and that kind of set in a codependency there for him, meaning that he feels his worth is taking care of others, which would kind of explain why he would also date younger people in need, people that are suffering, or at least he believes that to be the case. But of course, so that's interesting to think about, that Ed would be codependent in a certain way, because when you think about Rose, he was looking, you could argue, for someone that really, really needed him, right? Someone who was really in a bad spot and felt very gratified to help, right? And he sees the world through that lens, but he's not really seeing the human being as a three-dimensional person. Also, then pretty quickly he would start to insult or label, you have bad breath, or your legs have too much hair, or you have an STI, or you have this issue. And there's different types of codependency, and that's one of them actually, is where you will actually control, because the codependent personality is someone that really needs to take care of someone else. It's their entire way of looking at the world and relationships. They were socialized into that growing up, and they really can't see the world through any other lens. They can't see the world through a equal relationship where there are appropriate boundaries and where they ask for help. Sometimes, it's like a alternating where you're getting help. They're always in a mode of like, I'm the one that, and of course, none of their needs are being met because they have never been met. So they're really resentful and angry about that. But anyway, so one type of codependency is they're taking care of someone and they will actually socialize the other person to be more under-functioning. They will label them as an under-functioning person. The classic example is trying to enable the drinking, right? To keep the under-functioner addicted to alcohol and problematic. And so that provides a path, a self-esteem, a purpose to the codependent's life of just like, well, I'm taking care of this person. And if the person suffering from substance abuse, a problem starts to get sober, then this person subconsciously will try to socialize them back into dependency, right? And for Ed, it's possible that he was actually trying to make her have these aspects that needed problem. He was always looking at Rose through that lens of just like, she's disgusting, she has these issues, she has an STI. That's interesting too when you think about the themes of his distortions, those classic scenes with the bad breath and then the STI, just like being totally convinced. And it's just interesting to think about. Anyway, so maybe he has a whole pattern of that in his life with a lot of people in his life, and Liz recognizes that, but also is like, I'm not an underfunctioner. I have a life. I have a job. I have people in my life. I don't need you to solve anything. I don't need you to take care of me. I'm looking for a partner. And for her, Liz, she's like, I don't like the way that he comes at me, because I'm just inferring a lot here that maybe he comes at her in a codependent way of trying to make her into an underfunctioner. And she's like, I don't need that. You don't need to do that with me. But then you wonder, is that entirely true? Because maybe Liz does actually come across as a bit of an underfunctioner at times. But I don't know. At least, well, kind of. That whole dynamic with the photography thing, she didn't seem to be coming at him with a ton of competence in terms of, anyway, let's watch.
And it makes him feel in control if you need him.
Yeah.
And the more you go away from that, the more like insecure he doesn't have like the hold on you.
One of our biggest issues in mine and Ed's relationship is Ed's very insecure with himself, and he gets so defensive and bossy, which can come off as controlling.
Okay, this is actually really great because her perspective is one that is probably more accurate than what other people will exhibit on the show. So she's saying he's really insecure, and when he gets triggered along his insecurity lines, then he will get bossy and he will get hurtful in that way. And so it's tempting in her position to see it like he's a bossy person that doesn't care about my feelings and he's a narcissistic jerkface. Instead, she sees what's underneath, and maybe he's communicated about it, but probably not very effectively and not very often. Because even when he talks about his vulnerability, he does it in a surface manner. Like, I remember that one tell-all where they were broken up, and I think they got back together soon after. He was talking about how he had problems, he was going to therapy, and him and Colt were going after each other. Anyway, and even in those moments, he was talking about his vulnerability, I think, in a surface manner, in a way that doesn't provoke other people to feel sad for him. I'm trying to think of another person on the show that has done that. That has, Angela, ironically, at times will kind of do that. She will, break down and really exhibit her pain. I'm just trying to think who else on this show has ever done that. People have a really hard time with that, and that's one of my major things that I have learn and what I do with clients, and also clinicians that are learning how to be clinicians, or just people in my life, myself included, is almost all of us, if not all of us, have been shamed into being protective of our vulnerability and our emotions. And that will cause other people to not know when we're suffering, and thus will feel as if we're suffering greatly. And we're hoping that people will take care of us, notice us, have compassion, but it doesn't happen and we're unsure why, and we will conclude, well, it's other people. But there's a pretty good chance it's because you're not signaling enough. You're not letting other people know that you're suffering, right? We evolved to cry, and it's hard to know why exactly, but to me, it seems pretty clear that when we are sad, when we're hurt, we have often an involuntary, full-body physical reaction of water shooting out of our eyes. Then it leads to snot coming out of our nose. We will sob. Our breathing will become, broken. This kind of feeling. And what this does is we might wail and what that does is it's very noticeable to other people, right? And then other people will be provoked to have compassion and take care of you. All of us have been shamed into not exhibiting that feeling. I mean, I've often thought that if we could allow people to cry and sob at work or in politics, the world would be so much better place. I mean, imagine if Putin were to just cry on, behind the podium, and then people could come to him prior to invasion and be like, what's going on? He'd be like, well, I'm really sad that Russia isn't what it used to be, and that NATO is on our door, and people would be like, hey, buddy, we're not here to invade you. We could be friends. Welcome to the club, if you will. We can all listen to each other. We don't have to oppose each other. You're not a loser, But because of this lack of vulnerability, there's a defense against that, which is to strike back, right? And to try to account for one's vulnerability by building up one's supposed strength by literally killing tens of thousands of people. So we could all do that. Now, so for Ed, I don't think he is super great at that because I think it was relational traumas anyways, but she can see that, which is really great. Liz is very commendable in this moment. This almost never happens where someone can frame it in that way. And it's almost always something along these lines. So when you're thinking about your partners, or really anyone that's annoying you in life, is to think like, okay, it looks like they don't care, but probably underneath whatever is bothering me about this person is massive insecurity or massive pain or massive worries or massive self-esteem issues. Something's going on underneath that. It's hard to detect because they're very good at showing a different side of themselves because they're trying to avoid even acknowledging it to themselves. It doesn't necessarily justify it, but it gives an accurate picture so that you can at least know the lay of the land, and it can actually help too. Because for Liz, for example, instead of labeling him as this jerk face who doesn't care, she can say to him, okay, so I'm getting this vibe from you again. Is there something you're insecure about? Like with the picture thing with her friend, Liz could, with this perspective, could go to Ed and say, so I felt like you were kind of a jerk to me the other night. Was there something about that situation that you felt insecure about that provoked you to do that sort of bossy, sort of tone you get with me sometimes? That's a much more effective way at finding resolution than just saying you're a jerk face.
So does Ed let you have like alone time, like you time, and like be yourself?
I kind of figured out he lets me have me time when I'm going to work out.
He's supportive of you working out.
Yeah.
Wait, what? I mean, the conversation took a pretty weird turn. The friend asks, does Ed let you have, personal time, let you have personal time? And then she says, well, he lets me have personal time when I'm working out. What is going on here? So he doesn't let you have your own life. You can't, you're trapped. He will emotionally consequence you if you don't do what he, like, I don't know if we've heard that element to their relationship. It's pretty alarming if it's true.
I put on a couple pounds since we've been back together.
Does he want you to lose weight? Does he say that?
Not exactly, but he's definitely brought up the point of like past pictures of myself.
Yeah, it's pretty awful. So, and I don't have to bring up the irony of this, of course, but yeah, yikes. What do I say about this? Okay, what I'll say is that for our own lives, there's nothing wrong with wanting your partner to be attractive to you, right? But I would hope that on the grand scheme of one's priorities, that it would be pretty low on the priority list in terms of what is important in life, what's important in your relationship. So it sounds like he's heavily hinting at it, and that's unnice of him. But if I thought about it, and because one of the elements about Ed that I think is possible, it's hard to read him though, but I think it's possible that he actually is, as Liz would say, extremely insecure, like very, 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 very insecure, so insecure that it's almost impossible to detect. That's actually one of the things you can look for, is that if people seem to exhibit their insecurities at times, they probably are some of the most secure people you know, opposite of what people would think. And the people that seem to never have any insecurities, it just seems like impossible for you to imagine that they have insecurities. They probably have a lot of insecurities because they're running from them. They can't let them out. Anyway, so it's possible that for him, a part of his running from his insecurities and his lack of self-esteem or his relational traumas is to have a partner that he believes makes him look like a catch, or makes him look like a sought-after guy of some sort. And so for him, he wants to have someone at his side who presents to the outside world as attractive and a good catch and that kind of thing. And that running from his insecurity could cause him to overlook his compassion and morality around how to treat your partner, and he subtly pressures her by saying, "Look how great you look in this picture," which is, gross.
He will look through photos and be like, "Oh, do you ever think about being back to that size?" And it's kind of insulting.
Okay, that's even worse than I thought. So the friend's like, is he pressuring you to lose weight? And she's like, no. And then she gives this example. It's like, yeah. That's overt pressure and very insulting and very hurtful. Like, what are you doing?
I don't feel pretty. And that's kind of like why I started dance classes, like when we broke up before, because I'd see the type of girls he was hanging out with. I would hope that Ed would love me no matter what.
Yeah, troubling. So for Liz, there's actually, it reminds me of a lot of things that we've observed with Liz, actually, that this relationship is abusive, at the very least abusive-ish. I don't know, again, total speculation based on what they're presenting on the show. But a lot of things are popping into my head now when I hear that from her, because you hear that it's specific. It's a way that chronic victims will talk, in that she said he will, one, when asked directly, is he pressuring you to lose weight? She's like, no. And then she proceeds to give an example of like, yeah, he is. I mean, that's awful. Like, on the scale of partners who are pressuring their partners to, like, think of Azan and Nicole, right? Like, Azan was more subtle than that. Like, he was talking about working out. He was like, you need to work out more. You need to eat healthier. And so it was it was kind of veiled, but he's literally holding up a picture and being like, you should look like this again. You need to lose weight. You're disgusting. That kind of. Anyway, so they break up, and then she's like, and that's why I took dance classes. And I'm thinking, for her, she's like, I wanted to get in touch with my body and fall in love with myself again because I was being abused by him. But that's not what she said. What she said was, I noticed who he was attracted to. And even after breaking up, I was trying to have a body that he would be attracted to, because I either subconsciously wanted approval from him, or I wanted him to take me back or something. It's an approach to life of, I am only here to please other people. And if someone is displeased with me, at no point do I think, where am I in that equation? Let's rewind that.
He will look through photos and be like, oh, do you ever think about being back to that size? And it's kind of insulting. I don't feel pretty. And that's kind of like why I started dance classes, like when we broke up before, because I'd see the type of girls he was hanging out with.
Yeah. I'm reminded of a lot of other things that we would see. And again, it's hard to know, and I don't want to assume nefariousness. I think people are too quick to judge. In fact, not only just people watching the show, but clinicians. I learned a long time ago that humans have this natural tendency to see the worst in situations like this, and I noticed that, and I thought, wow, you're really going off just a couple of data points. Like a common thing that I would just one of many examples of this that I can think of off the top of my head is that we would have a family, and the kid, say the 10-year-old, would be having some behavioral problems, like they are defiant, they're having meltdowns at school. And there was always like one or two therapists that would immediately assume that the child is being sexually abused by their parents. And I'm like, well, maybe, but, and the way they talked about it, it was just like, of course, that's what's happening. And if there was no data along those lines, they would claim that, well, that's because the family's in denial of it, or the kid doesn't want to come forward. It's very common. And of course, yeah, that actually could be true. But to see these therapists always assuming that. So I made a point early in my career to always, assume quote unquote innocence until proven guilty along a lot of these, it's not guilt or innocence in terms of this sort of thing. But to not jump to conclusions, because humans are very complicated. And I wouldn't want someone to assume anything about me if they just heard a couple details, and I don't want to do that to other people. So also, once I actually started treating people, I started to learn the depth that everyone has in their personality, and how initial impressions are almost never correct, or at the very least don't appreciate the full depth of individuals. And so I've had a lot of benefit from that, of getting to know people where maybe 5 years into treating them, I'll learn a whole aspect of their selfhood that I did not even imagine could have existed before. And so, anyway. So my point is I don't want to assume that Ed and her have a nefarious, abusive style of relationship and dynamic, but we did hear that phone call. We have heard a lot of things from them. And I think she's even stated as much, that she comes from other abusive relationships. And to her, Ed might feel very familiar to her, and thus she's attracted to that because that's what's familiar, is the abuse and projective identification, which I won't go into. But because he's not physically abusive, then she's like, he's the best partner I've ever had, but there's still that emotional abuse that's happening. I mean, just that alone of, hey, look at that picture of you. You looked thinner then. Why don't you be like that? I mean, that alone is abusive in a certain way. It's hard to, you would have to really have a lot of caveats around that. If he, I'm just trying to figure out a way to not see that as at least kind of abusive, if not extremely abusive. You know what I mean? Of course, I wasn't there. We'd have to ask her. But the worry I have is that given the way that she talks, it could indicate a personality and a history for her where she cannot detect when abuse is happening. And thus, she could be in an abusive relationship and not even know it. And we would be watching it and not hear from her that it's happening, because she, you know what I mean? So, but they're living their lives. We can think about ourselves, right? We can think about if you are in a situation like that. So here's the axiom that I will put forth, which is that if you identify as a person who has a history of a number of abusive relationships, and you're currently in a relationship that you've evaluated to not be abusive, there's a chance that it's just abusive in a different way, or that it is less abusive, and thus you don't think it's abusive at all. And of course, the solution to this is to have therapy with someone who actually understands all these things and can help you sift through it, someone that doesn't jump to conclusions, but can help you to evaluate it, heal from the traumas you've been through, so you can orient your your worth and your needs in a way that you can start noticing things. Because, the way that she comes across, I mean, just imagine that happening. I think most people, if they were in touch with their needs, Liz would be like exhibiting some communication around that. She'd be saying something like, yeah, I mean, it was pretty awful what he said. Yeah, but she's not doing that. She's like reporting something, and the friend is like, wait, what? So, and I guess that's another thing to think about is if when you talk about your partner to other people or to your therapist for that matter, and other people tend to have this like, wait, what? It could be an indication that you have normalized a behavior based on your long history of abuse that should not be considered normal in your mind. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.